Well, joining me now on Comic Book Central is a man of many talents. He is an assistant professor. He is a pop culture historian. He is a writer. His latest book, I have it right here. It's called Cliffhanger, Cinematic Superheroes of the Serials, 1941 to 1952. A big welcome to Christopher Irving. Christopher, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Happy to have you here. I love the look. If you're listening to this, you're going to be in for a great chat today. But if you're getting a chance to watch us on YouTube, I always love talking to, we'll say, pop culture historian. I like that, but I love looking at their backgrounds because as I'm doing the interview, I'm also like trying to figure out what they got going on. You're also raising like the next generation of pop culture history. I call myself a nerd, but
yeah,
you're raising the next gen there.
I'm raising a 6-year-old named Grayson. And I love telling the story. He was named by Joe Staten, actually, who's a dear friend. And yeah, Gray is the reason my office is such a disaster. We have like great. All of the Star Wars.
No, it looks great.
We have like a refinished Millennium Falcon.
Oh, hey, hold on. Here you go. Hold on. There's mine.
Oh, nice.
We get the Millennium. Yeah, we can compare Millennium Falcons. We're nerds.
The gun popped off. I need to fix it. I keep the dish off so it doesn't get lost. And we have like a ton of Transformers. So they're kind of all over the place. But
it's fantastic.
There's a lot going on. And I've got more stuff. Like I have an Erwin Hazen Wildcat sketch up here. I have like a Marty Nodell signature.
Oh, wow.
I have a couple Jack Burnley prints from when I saw him.
That's fantastic.
Back in 2000.
Cool teacher, I think, meant something different in the 60s. Cool teacher now in 2023, I think, means a completely different thing. Like, you're a cool teacher now, but it's like all nerd stuff. So that's pretty cool.
Well, I had a very cool teacher. I had sorry, I'm going to switch glasses. I had a professor by name of Tom DeHaven who was a huge influence on me. And he went to write the Superman novel, It's Superman, set in the Great Depression, as well as the excellent book, Our Hero, Superman on Earth. But beyond that, he had done these novels about comic strips. So I was fortunate that I had one. He was inherently, and I'm sure he still is, inherently cooler than I am now.
I don't know. We'll find out. We'll find out how cool you are in this interview. Yeah. Just doing that introduction, I almost felt like I was introducing Indiana Jones. It's like professor by day and cliffhanger by night.
I save the ass kicking for nighttime when he's in bed. We have to wait till he's had his melatonin. And
that's fair. Yeah. We're going to talk about this book in just a moment. It's one of my faves from Tomorrow's Publishing, TWOMORROWS.com. You can get that. So be sure to get that. Assistant professor at Virginia Commonwealth University, correct? VCU?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Be honest. This was just a way to get paid to read comics and watch movies and TV for a living, right? Is that?
It's a total racket. I was sorry. I have reading glasses and I'm so not used to them still. It worked out that I was able to pitch a comic book history class to VCU, communication arts department specifically. And they accepted it, and it would fill up the first couple semesters. And by the second semester, I added a comic book film class, which they were down with.
Nice.
And then I wound up taking over visual communications. And so, it turned into a really cool way to, get paid to talk about what I love.
Yeah.
And it's also forced me to learn beyond, my comfort zone into deeper media history, which has made me have more of an appreciation for the things I love. And I like to think it makes me a better professor. But yeah, so it's a racket. It's great.
Well, you're doing quite well, because let's talk about some of the history of visual communication. I think you mentioned that. Star Wars Decoded. Also, Star Wars Decoded The Mandalorian. In case is this the advanced class?
Yeah. So Star Wars Decoded is a 1 semester class.
Yeah.
About all of the films and culture that led to George Lucas's original Star Wars.
Okay, so Campbell, you're talking about Campbell.
We talk a bit about Campbell, but communication
Hero's Journey and stuff.
our students, our students are going to be comic book artists, illustrators, concept designers, special effects. Like one of my students actually emailed me last week, former students, and she's now doing post-production on Superman and Lois. And she's like,
Oh, wow.
I didn't know anything about comic books till I took one of your classes. And I'm so, and she wrote this really lovely email. So I teach things with that in mind. So for Star Wars Decoded, we watch, Hidden Fortress, Dam Busters, THX, American Graffiti. We look at a little bit of Jack Kirby, New Gods. And then Star Wars Effect is everything from Return of the Jedi on up. And we talk a lot about digital production and how the Star Wars films, including the prequels, were traditionally experimental indie films.
Okay. Well, so you're actually prepping them for different things, not just watching films, but you're preparing and you're preparing the next generation, as we mentioned.
Yep.
Superhero Decoded, Vampire and Film, talking about vampires.
That's for art history. I took the summer off on that one, but yeah, that's great. We we read Dracula, and then we watch a ton of different vampire films.
There's a ton. Yeah, I don't even know where you start. What, Nosferatu? Is that the earliest?
Nosferatu. Maybe? Yeah, Nosferatu.
Okay.
I want to show Near Dark, but it's been hard to get because it's an online class. It's been hard to get the streaming rights. Interview with the Vampire, of course.
Okay. Do you show one of my favorites, Love at First Bite, with George Hamilton?
Yeah, that is yes. They actually have their final paper needs to be on Love at First Bite. It's.
I wish you weren't pulling my leg. I so wish you.
No, I'm not. No, I mean seriously, that thing's a fucking masterpiece.
No, they don't. They don't. I knew that.
I'm just.
You almost had me going because you are a professor, so you almost had me going. Miyazaki.
Well, listen, but the great thing about if you say anything with a straight face, they'll believe you.
Or a British accent.
Yeah,
I found those two things to be true.
My little boy does a thing where he speaks in a British accent when he wants to. And I came into my office last week, and he's sitting here with my glasses on and my sweater.
No.
And he's at my computer, like, "Oh, I am a professor. I am working." And I was like, "Get away from my computer, dude! Like, I had my dissertation up, right?" And I'm like, "Okay, buddy, let's." He's like, "No, I'm like, I need my glasses." No. And so I took my glasses, and he started like doing the Velma thing because he can't see.
Every pop culture reference kid's gonna be very convincing when he grows up. He's gonna be.
I'm scared.
He's gonna be in charge of the world. And Batman and Media. I want to mention Batman and Media too. So so all those things. That's unbelievable. I do want to mention your first book. When you going back to 2006, I think, The Blue Beetle Companion. It's a look at the history of DC Comics character, all the iterations, right? Going back, like there's a modern one, but that's sort of like the 2006 version. But there's like going back to 1939, I think.
Yeah, 1939.
Yeah. Okay. Are you excited or nervous about the new film coming out?
I'm excited. I've gotten to know Cully Hamner really well over the years, and I just saw him at Heroes Con, and we're both just like very excited. I imagine he's more excited than I am, or more nervous, because it's his character. What I'm most excited about is my kid wants to see it. Good. The first live action superhero film my son's going to see is The Blue Beetle.
Because 6 years old probably would have been probably too young to grasp things. He probably knows visuals and different things, but
he's seen superhero movies, but not like on the big screen. Like we just saw Transformers a few weeks ago, and that was great.
But, and now your house is full of Transformers, so that's
and Rise of the Beast was actually really good. I was very happy. But I'm excited because when I did that book, so before The Blue Beetle Companion, I'd worked, pretty heavily with John Cook on Comic Book Artist magazine, and we wound up doing 2 issues on Charlton. And at the time, it was around 2000. I was fresh out of college, and people were just like, "Why are you doing Charlton? Their comics suck. Their comics were crap." And
these are for people that don't know, maybe younger. Like Charlton Comics was, you're probably looking at 60s, 70s heyday.
50s through 70s,
right? And Blue Beetle sort of, I think that was the second iteration, fell in that zone.
So Blue Beetle started at Fox Comics, which was run by the most crooked comics publisher of the 1930s and 40s, which is saying a lot.
Right,
Victor
right.
Fox. And Fox basically owed his printer money. And so his printer, Holyoke, took over Blue Beetle, all of his books for like a year to recoup their debt. Then he got Blue Beetle back. And then he went out of business. And then Charlton got a hold of it in the 50s. Right. And it's what I didn't realize till after the book came out is this is the only superhero who has actually changed to meet every popular trend at the time in superhero comics.
Oh, okay. That's interesting.
Because they basically, like when Superman was big, he was a Superman type. Right. Suddenly he was a Captain America type. They were really just kind of, I think, taking the temperature of the market, and just kind of pushing Blue Beetle into that mold. But yeah, anyways, I'm excited about the movie. I don't think anyone took me seriously when I was like, I'm going to do this book.
Right.
First book, and I was in my 20s, and I'm single and I'm dating. I'm like, yeah, my book's on this guy, the Blue Beetle. And, I was like, okay, dude.
Well, I think when you wrote it too, it wasn't that third iteration that is the version everybody knows now. I think it had just come out not long before, like maybe that year or the year before or something. Maybe a couple of years before.
Yeah, he came out around that time. When Ted Cord was killed.
Yeah.
And I think we already knew Jaime was going to happen. I actually pitched it to John Morrow, and I was upfront with him. I'm like, look, John, I know this is
ahead of Tomorrow's publishing
for
the book,
yes,
right?
Yes. He and his wife Pam, and I was like, I know it's probably not going to sell a lot. It's kind of a weird book, but no one's done this, and if anyone is ever going to do it, now might be the time.
Yeah.
And to his credit, I have to give John so much credit on this. And appreciation. He not only let me do the book, but he let me do it pretty much the way I wanted to, which was a straight essay. I wasn't going to do Q&As like a lot of what Tomorrow's was doing at the time. Right. I wanted it to really be like a prose kind of an essay book. And I'm still the print run sold out, but I know digital still sells, and I'm hoping to have a huge spike.
With the movie. Well, that's the thing we love about Tomorrow's is we talked about this on other interviews. It's just like there's so many niche things. No matter what you love about comics, there's a book for it. There's a magazine for it. There's something for it. And if they sell out, you got the digital versions. If they have the print versions, you usually get the digital versions with it. So it's so cool. But look, we could probably do a whole thing on Blue Beetle. But that's not why you're here today. But that does get us into why we are here today, in that we now, like, everything is a superhero movie. Thank goodness. We love that. As nerds, we love that. But I've always wanted to talk about, especially on Comic Book Central, it's these origins. What laid the groundwork, even if it wasn't that great? What were the things that were keeping it going? The TV shows in the 70s, all the animated series, all of these things. And I never really had an opportunity to go back and talk about the movie serials of the 40s. A lot of obviously those people are gone now. It's so tough. But again, you've made it so much easier for all of us because we've got this incredible book. And I love the artwork on the front too, because it looks like the artwork of an old serial, like excitement, killer robots, jungle action. Like, was that intentional going in of how do we make this look like from the 1940s?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you, that's actually there's a magazine called Screen Thrills Illustrated that came out, I want to say, in the 60s, and it covered the serials. Yeah. And so we were really looking at Screen Thrills Illustrated would do kind of a similar layout. And this was Michael Cronenberg did the cover, and the interiors were by my dear friend Rich Fowkes, who also designed Blue Beetle. And what we really wanted to do is kind of get that Screen Thrills look.
Yeah.
And I
mentioned the art, like that you get the artwork too. Like it really transforms you back to the 40s, doesn't it? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's like you're talking. This is insanely incredible.
Yeah, we were hoping for that. Yeah.
I'm
But
sorry. Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead. You were talking
yeah.
about the artwork, the
Yeah,
layout. Go
so
ahead.
yeah, we're kind of, it was my way of talking to those original movie serials fans, the people who, would watch them prints in, crowded apartments in New York before they were made available. It was my way of saying, hey, look, guys, I see you.
Yeah.
You were the ones who kept serials alive, so someone like me can write a book about it. Hopefully inspiring other people who have never checked them out before to also get in on the fun, so we can kind of keep them alive longer.
Yeah, it looks amazing. It's just
Thank you.
once you pick it up, you can't put it down. It's just the artwork, everything. But it's interesting too. There's so much I want to get to here, but
Sure.
going back to it, it's almost like, okay, we have the comic books. How do you extend that? How do you extend those adventures? It
Yeah,
was initially radio, so you click the radio, and you have the Adventures of Superman. And they would introduce, I think, Kryptonite may have been introduced on the radio series, I think.
it
But
was.
then it's like we want to go next level with this, and then it was the movie serials. How and so that became such a huge thing. Where did this idea first come about for you? You've been working on this for quite a while, right?
Yeah, a third of my life.
Okay. A little bit.
Yeah,
A little bit, yeah.
I started this after Blue Beetle, so around '06,
Wow. Wow.
and I had a draft finished around 2008 before I moved to New York. Um, and I just came back to it. It's been on my back burner for years, and I
Okay.
really got back to it maybe 3 years ago. Um, well, I've always had a love of the movie serials. The first one I ever saw was I was 11, and it was Zorro's Fighting Legion, and I didn't know what a movie serial was. I didn't know why Zorro died at the end. I didn't know why he fell off a rope bridge to his death.
Right. What
Um,
happened? I was liking him, and then yeah, you didn't
yeah,
get the
he's just gone.
concept
I was
yet.
like, what? This is a downer. But I would discover like VHS copies, and I have to reiterate too. I was born in '77, so comics history, like you had to really, and I grew up in a town called Farmville, Virginia. So it's a small town with a college, but like you had to really look for this
Mhm.
stuff, right? And I found like
Libraries, probably libraries and things you're digging
yeah,
through. Yeah.
Longwood College had some, or university, their library
Yeah.
had some things that I could check out. But I found a two tape copy of The Adventures of Captain Marvel at
Oh,
my local Roses. And the Batman serials were re-released on VHS around the time of the movie coming out. Uh, but I really wanted to learn more. And what really got me, okay, I'm going to try and keep this short. In 2001, I did a tribute article on Gray Morrow, the great artist. I'm actually sitting in his desk chair right here. I
oh
inherited
wow.
it. I became
Very
very good
cool.
friends with Gray's wife Poco, in covering Gray's life, and I inherited a few things, including the desk chair and a box of his VHS tapes of movie serials.
Wow.
And so I would come home from my elementary art teaching job and make a bit of coffee and a French press of coffee, and I would sit down and watch like 2 or 3 chapters to relax. And I realized like, my love of the serials never went away, but as we were starting to see superhero cinema start to emerge,
Mhm.
but also no one had really done anything about this for comics specifically.
Right.
The
Yeah,
way
this is
I
specifically the superheroes that sprang forth from
superhero
comic
comic
books, maybe
serials.
a few nods to the comic strip origins, some of those
Well,
coming in a little bit, but not like the full-blown movie serials. That's sort of been done, but this is focused on superheroes.
this is the thing. Most movie serial research you'll find, I mean, there's not as much now. There is, and I have to put a huge shout out to Ed Hulse of Morania Press. It's Murania. Ed was, he is like an amazing historian of serials. He's been interviewing actors and so forth for decades. And Ed's work is authoritative. He has been a resource on this. Like, I cannot take any credit, because I feel like I want to give so much credit to Ed for his just unending support, and he's been wonderful, like amazing. But yeah, there were a ton of serials, right? And they go all the way back to like Whatever Happened to Mary and Perils of Pauline for the silent era.
Oh, the Republic serials coming in and things, like Indiana Jones is based on things we know like that.
Oh yeah. Totally. And it's what I felt was that I had another thing going at the same time. I don't like comic books and comic book films being treated as separate history, right? It's all a collective media history. So I wanted to give the early comic book film history, the serials, by tying it in with the creators and the people who made the comics themselves. So you have this, you pick this book up and you could understand what Simon and Kirby went through in creating Captain America and being fired from Timely. And then the movie serial comes out and Joe Simon sees it on a marquee, not even knowing they were making a Captain America serial. But also, if I have to give the comic strip guys a nod and the radio ones. But the truth is, if I did this book on every character that appeared in any comic, it would most likely be an index. It wouldn't be a book because of
okay, you tapped into something there. That's what I want to talk about, because it's really written. It's different until they do. It's not like here's this serial, so we can like go do like a checklist, and go, okay, I saw that one. It's really the foundations, as you mentioned, bringing in the comic creators. Then how did that translate to these serials? And then you almost sort of, in a few instances, bring it to modern day, into the George Reeves TV series, into the Batman 66 series and things like that. And one thing I really notice about this is it's written not only from a pop culture historian perspective, but it's written from a fanboy perspective, because you definitely talk about things that irk you in here, which is very fun to read.
Thank you.
You're very critical about what needs to be criticized. You'll call things out, but also in a loving fashion but this laid the groundwork. But I love even the fact that, like, with Bob Kane, the creator of Batman, it's like you'll bust his chops from like some interview he did about like, the Batman actor was overweight and the kid looked like he was in his 20s, too old. And you're like, I think what he meant to say was the sequel version. So I just love reading that, of this sort of like fanboy, wrote it. Does that make sense?
I mean, I appreciate that. I don't think of myself as a fanboy, to be honest.
Okay.
But I think it's, what it's like? It's like looking at a photo of yourself in middle school affectionately, and like I was a gawky kid. There was this one photo, a rejected high school yearbook photo. I was in 8th grade. And I was trying to do like a Harrison Ford kind of lopsided smirk, but it looked really weird. They made me, I was like, I look at that with affection, even though I look terrible in it. And I think
the kid's trying.
I was trying, and I look at these, I look at, I guess it was Dick Purcell who played Captain America, who had like a Jersey accent and a bit of he was kind of a stocky guy, you gotta kind of call it out. Like he was a terrible Captain America. But Dale Van Sickle, the stunt performer, was a great Captain America, but I think that's part of the way I look at it is part of studying this stuff is, let's take it seriously, but not be too serious about it. Because when you do that, have you ever had to sit through an academic lecture on comics? I've had to sit through a couple, and they're dreadful. Early in my 20s, and I was like, I'm never teaching comics that way, because these people have sucked the life and joy out of one of the most fun institutions in our culture. So I want to do it with a little tongue-in-cheek. I want to have some fun with it.
It's fun. It's a fun read. It reads that way. It reads it as a conversation, like two fanboys are sitting around having a beer and watching these things or reading comics, and that's what I love about it. You mentioned the stunts. I got to talk about like because what they lacked in CGI and special effects,
But
obviously
they
nothing
lacked
back
computers.
lacked everything back in the day.
Yeah.
They had to make it. These had to be real people doing real things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you talk about that. I think it was Yakima Canutt who was,
Hmm.
did a huge thing in Stagecoach, and
Yep.
talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. I think what makes them even, and I show these to my students periodically, through different classes. Um, but there was a director named William Whitney who worked at Republic Studios, which was, a smaller kind of a poverty row studio. They were made up of different poverty row studios, but they were still like B level. They did a lot of the Roy Rogers westerns and so forth. But they had the best stunt performers. They had Davy Sharp, who doubled for Tom Tyler in Captain Marvel, and he would do these just like somersaults, and he could just kind of take off, and they, kind of edit that with they actually, for Captain Marvel flying, first movie superhero ever was Captain Marvel. They had this balsa wood mannequin they put on a pulley, and if he was going to fly upwards, they basically just like filmed it going down and reversed the film. I mean, it was genius, right?
Yeah.
So the thing with Republic is they may not have had as much money, but they had incredible stunt performers. They had the Lydecker brothers, who were amazing special effects geniuses, especially with miniatures and so forth. But they also had William Whitney and John English, who were just two amazing directors. And they knew how to stage a fight scene. They would break it up. The modern fight scene comes from a lot of the work William Whitney and his ilk did as well. Spencer Bennett was a director who his first job was on, I think, a Perils of Pauline as a stunt performer. And he became a serial director. And he directed the final movie serial ever, Blazing the Overland Trail. But, Bennett could direct action as well. The difference is that there's something a little grittier about Whitney's. But there is that kind of that sense of, especially with the Republic serials, because they had the money, they were able to do more takes if they needed to, more so than the Sam Katzman Columbia. That's another whole story. But yeah, they had these very competent, very amazing stuntmen, and they worked from the stuntmen outwards. That's how they cast, rather than just trying to stick a stuntman to double.
Well,
for
that's what they
someone half
had.
his
I mean, but
size.
that was the selling point. That was what they knew. They couldn't pull off the special effects, so it had to be stunt driven. You mentioned Republic too. It's interesting. You get into this in the book in great detail, but talk about making it tough to make a Superman movie today. Man, was it tough to make a Superman movie back in the day, right? Like it
Yeah.
was. It just give us a little hint of that, because we want to leave that for the readers. But
Well, yeah, Republic was, and
it
I think
became
enough. I
something
think
very different.
yeah, they were going to make a Superman serial, I think around 1940, and it fell through, mostly because of Paramount getting the. It turns out the Paramount option included live action.
Right.
Paramount did the Fleischer cartoons, which I'm actually
Which
watching right
you
now.
get into in the book. Yep,
They
that's in the
do,
book too.
yeah,
Yep.
because they do fit. They're not serials, but they fit in there. I think they really
Yep.
help establish the power of a superhero in cinema.
No, you're setting the stage. You're setting the time period. That's what we love.
But yeah, so basically they were going to have Superman fighting a bunch of robots invading Metropolis, and they written like I think they had come up with the original like rough estimation script, which is kind of a rough draft to figure out how much it's going to cost and what it's going to need. And the deal fell through. So they're like, well, crap. We're going to rename it The Mysterious Dr. Satan. And basically they were able to only afford one robot. And it didn't quite come out like they were hoping. And I will leave it there, but I will tell you, The Mysterious Dr. Satan is kind of an amazing serial because of the robot.
Yeah. And this is a mad scientist, just so people don't think it's like, like some demonized thing or something. It's a mad scientist, it's a robot.
His unfortunate name is Dr. Satan.
But it's you go into in the book. You talk about the darkness of the serials too. There's suicides, there's Captain Marvel flinging people to their death off there's so many different things. Yeah, it just gets crazy. I can't recommend this more. It's hardback. It's you're gonna have a fun time with this. You also have a podcast. I want to just in the time we have left, I just want to mention so get the book, tomorrowspublishing.com. Go get the book, but you also have a podcast.
It's fallen off a little bit the last few weeks because I've been teaching a summer class, and also I've been a little sick. I had strep a few weeks ago. Yes,
I'm glad we're doing this now. That would have been a difficult interview.
I had strep.
Glad you're feeling better.
I've been having ear issues. So, but yeah, it's called Inner Workings, and it's at iwpodcast.com. I've done a few newer interviews, but I've also dug a few things out of my archives. I have what I think has been unpublished, a Denny O'Neil interview from about 5 years ago, where we talk about Frank Miller and New York and Batman, and editing it made me miss Denny even more because he was wonderful. I just posted an interview I did with Sam Hamm, who wrote the first draft of the Batman '89 film. I have Dan Chichester. I did a great interview with him. I did an interview with Alex Ross. Of course, I did one with my good buddy Mike Allred, who I don't know if you can see all the Madman stuff. I make
you do a lot of crowdfunding and exactly. So there's that out there. There is a treasure trove of knowledge in pop culture history at ChristopherIrving.com. Am I correct in that?
Well, I mean, there's a CV. There's a CV to point you to all the things I've written. It's really like an academic portfolio site for me. And it's weird because I started teaching about 7 years ago. And when I moved back to Richmond 10 years ago from New York, I was trying to figure out the next book. I wound up acting. I got into acting for a little bit. So it's kind of, but it's turned more into my portfolio site. But yeah, I mean, that's a list of everything I've written, including every article for like Comics Buyer's Guide, Comic Book Artist Magazine. I did some for Jack Kirby Collector, also Alter Ego, Back Issue. And at some point, I would like to take all of the interviews I did for Graphic NYC and just post the raw Q&As for people to have for reference. But yeah, ChristopherIrving.com is the place to go for that.
That's where we're going to head. I am so glad I got this. It's Tomorrow's Publishing. The book is called Cliffhanger. Christopher, amazing job on this. Continued success. I am so glad we had a chance to chat about some superhero movie serials today. Here.
I love talking about it, man. I love writing about it, but you don't really have anyone to talk to while you're working on this.
You do here. You do today on Comic Book Central.
I appreciate it, Joe.
Thank you for joining me.
All right. Thanks again. This was fun.